Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justice, and today I'm going to be diving into some of my least favorite horror sequels in my all-time favorite horror franchises. For this list, I just wanted to give a big disclaimer. These aren't all necessarily the worst horror sequels ever made. I only included movies from the franchises that I love and the ones that more or less frustrate me when watching the franchises or give me kind of an eye roll. So every single movie that's on this list, they have different levels of why I dislike them. Some of them aren't necessarily bad movies, they're just not the greatest movies in a said franchise that I enjoy at the end of the day. So you're not going to see things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or even like Halloween, because I enjoy some movies from those franchises. Overall, I feel more distaste for those movies in the franchises than I do any enjoyment that I could possibly get out of them, because so many of the sequels in those franchises are just god-awful and bad, and I die on that hill. That's that simple. But I picked 10 movies to talk about today, and they are in no particular order except for what's in first place, because that is a god-awful fucking movie, but you guys will hear about that come soon. Don't you fret. But with that all out of the way, let's get into these movies. Now, the very first movie I want to get into is Scream 6. Now, I know with like the recent events of Scream 7, fans are extremely divided about what's considered the worst Scream movie. Scream is one of my all-time favorite franchises. It's in my top 3 franchises of all time, and I do find some enjoyment in every one of the entries, including the ones I don't like, even this one that I don't necessarily like. The only reason I could ever see myself watching this movie is if I wanted to go through and watch the entire franchise and then see like the story from beginning to end. There isn't much want for me to want to jump into Scream 6 as like a standalone experience and to just throw it off, which I think is a really sad thing to say, because out of all of the Scream movies, it is the farthest removed away from any of our main characters from previous films. The biggest difference in this film versus any of the other entries in the franchise is in this version, Ghostface takes New York, and it could have been a really fun change up. I even enjoyed many of the sequences in the film. They were very brutal, but where the movie ended up losing me at really was the fact that none of the characters really had any stakes against them for dying. It just felt like the movie wasn't going to take any risks, and it really didn't take any risks. You had like all these amazing set pieces in the film, but then you would have like a main character or one of the main side characters that appeared and was introduced to us in the previous film, and they never actually developed the balls to do anything with them and kill them off and raise the stakes of the movie. You literally have a character like Chad who gets like repeatedly stabbed over and over and over again by 2 different Ghostface at the same fucking time, and yet for some reason by the end of the movie he becomes our new Dewey and somehow survived said thing. Yet I've seen Dewey survive some pretty stupid shit in these movies, and they were never that far-fetched as it was for Chad. And that was my biggest problem with this movie, is it just didn't feel like it necessarily wanted to take any risks with the story whatsoever. It just kind of felt like the run-of-the-mill same thing again, and I think a part of the problem with that, and it's not necessarily this movie's fault entirely, is that they were very much writing to build a trilogy around the Carpenter sisters, and I do very much enjoy them. I do think that Melissa Barrera comes into her own as Sam in this entry, but because it was like supposed to be the middle point to a trilogy that now is probably never going to see the light of day or ever happen, because the likelihood of Melissa Barrera coming back for this franchise is like extremely slim to none, it's super hard to like rank this movie or talk about it in a more positive light, because we don't know the whole story of what was going to happen. But also this movie is in a franchise, like I get they were trying to do a 3-movie arc, but like you're in the sixth movie of your franchise, you still need to be able to make a good standalone movie. Like you can like do all the things that you had in it where you are trying to like bring things to your fans and like Easter eggs and stuff for your fans to like get down with and enjoy and see. I mean, I was a total sucker for the whole Ghostface room and all that had like all the past Ghostface like murder weapons and robes and all that. Like that was sick. But at the end of the day, like if you're going to do stuff like that, like that's all fine and dandy. Take some risks with your story and don't have just a filler film in your franchise. And the next one I completely have nothing but disdain for, and again, it's in my big three favorite franchises. It would be Saw 9, Spiral, the Book of Saw. Now, I saw this movie in theaters, and you would think that I would look at it with kinder eyes because it was actually my very first Saw movie that I ever saw in theaters, and usually I end up liking a movie a little bit more if I see it in theaters, but perhaps I'm noticing a trend because I also saw Scream 6 in theaters, and that was my first Scream movie in theaters, so yeah, maybe I just shouldn't see franchises I like in theaters. It's a bad omen. But this movie was a reboot of the Saw franchise, so it stepped away from the soap opera elements of our first 8 entries of the films and was completely rebooting it with new characters. No John Kramer, no Jigsaw, passing mention, but that is it. And the entire film was rested upon Chris Rock's shoulders, and boy, he did not do any of the heavy lifting in this movie. I just feel like this whole movie did not know what it actually wanted to be at the end of the day. Like, it just felt very embarrassed of itself as a Saw movie because it never quite went there with many of the traps like the other entries in the franchise does. And then on top of it too, it couldn't figure out if it wanted to be this like nitty gritty horror movie like the Saw movies, or if it wanted to be this cop drama comedy thing. And yes, the cop story has always been a thing in Saw. It's a huge part of all the Saw movies, but it just didn't work here because it just felt like a buddy cop comedy at times. And you had Chris Rock trying to force in all these really stupid one-liners. And then the biggest sin of all is Saw can have the stupidest twists. It can have the most off-the-wall twists that make no sense. It can even retcon every other movie previously to it to make said twist. But as long as that twist is shocking and entertaining, no matter how stupid it is, I can get down with it. This movie, I predicted the twist immediately because the killer in this entry ends up being Chris Rock's partner, and it was just so telegraphed. You have this scene where you've seen everybody else, the other cops, getting killed by Jigsaw throughout the movie, or I'm sorry, whatever the fuck the pig man puppet is. Like, is it Jigsaw? Like, I don't remember, and I don't feel the need to rewatch the movie to find out. But you have all of the other people in the police station getting killed off one by one by the new Jigsaw copycat, and it shows them in gruesome detail. But then when Chris Rock's partner ends up getting killed by Jigsaw, it's an off-screen death, and you still have like 30-40 minutes of this movie left. So the moment that happened, I automatically knew that he was going to end up being the killer. I saw this movie in theaters with my boyfriend, and I literally looked at him during the off-screen death and was like, yep, that's the killer. Yep. Cue the credits. So out of every Saw movie, like, this one was just the one that frustrated me the most. And like, yes, there were other really bad Saw movies, but the other really bad Saw movies, more often than not, I can usually have like some kind of fun with. This one just feels like such a slog for me to get through every time. And I've tried giving it more chances, and I really have, and it just doesn't not work for me whatsoever. I think Chris Rock was out of his depth. I don't think he really fit the role of being in this movie. I think he's a good actor in other things I've seen him in. He's just not a good actor in Saw. It just isn't his thing. And coming up next on this list is the fourth Final Destination film, titled The Final Destination, because you get it, it was supposed to be the last one, but then Final Destination 5 came out, and then like, I believe Final Destination Bloodlines is a thing, right? Yeah, that came out like, what, 2 years ago? It's almost like when a horror franchise says they're gonna do the final film, it usually ends up being one of the worst entries for some reason, and then also isn't actually the end. But hey, what do I know, right? If the Final Destination had been the final entry in this franchise, though, it would have been a total, complete freaking joke. This movie just, it doesn't even feel like a movie that was released to theaters. It feels like a direct to video kind of film. All the effects in it are super lame. All the camera work, the acting, it just feels extremely forced. And yes, Final Destination is very guilty of having very two-dimensional, flat characters, but this one I feel like takes the cake on that, and there really isn't any likable characters to be seen anywhere in the entire runtime. In fact, there was one character in the entire movie that I found to be at least halfway decent, and that's because they gave him the littlest bit of backstory. And that character wasn't even the main fucking character, so what the fuck are you doing? This movie was just very much overshadowed by its bad effects. The 3D effect of the 2000s, it just was not good. I mean, even speaking of Saw, they had Saw 3D, and the effects in that one aren't any good, but something tells me at least they were a little better there, because at least it felt like it was continuing the Saw story, even if it was stupid. Versus this one, it's just another standalone Final Destination movie, and the fact that it was supposed to be the final film of the franchise, but didn't actually give like any fun nods to any other films. They didn't bring Tony Todd back in this entry, and there wasn't just any like actually good Easter eggs to the rest of the franchise. If the franchise would have ended on this, like, I am so glad it didn't. Like, it's as simple as that. And if you guys want to hear some more in-depth thoughts about what I thought of this movie, I did do a review on this film when I was doing a lead up to the Final Destination movies. But just to sum it up, it is the worst movie in the franchise, and I really do think you would be hard-pressed to find anyone that disagrees with me on that. Coming up next is the Conjuring spin-off for The Nun, the first Nun anyways. The Nun was such a huge disappointment for me. When I saw The Conjuring 2, I immediately fell in love with Valak. I thought that Valak was this really scary character, and they could do so much with them. And the fact that they were going to be making their own spin-off for Valak, I was completely sold. Like, sign me up, man. Like, I will be there opening night. I'm gonna be into it. And I was there opening night, and it just was such a freaking, like, letdown. I think one of the biggest things I saw people say about The Nun was the fact that it felt more like this, like, haunted house ride that you were on, and, like, you were watching everything happen as you went to set piece to set piece to set piece. And when I heard that reference to it, that's literally how I feel about that movie, because that's really all it is. It has a lot of really schlocky effects, a very poor story, and it just took everything that made Valak scary away from the character. Like, I get that inherently when you get more sequels with a horror movie monster, they become less scary over time. It just comes from the territory of the genre. A big part of the reason why these monsters in horror are so terrifying is because of how little is unexplained about them and how little you know. So, like, obviously, as more sequels come out and you see more of the character, it's going to desensitize you to said character. But here, it was only Valak's second outing, and they already dropped the ball and lost everything that made Valak Valak and made Valak scary, or even the Conjuring movies scary, which is something that they've struggled with so many of these spin-offs for the Conjuring franchise. But this one feels the most egregious to me because Valak is such a good character, and they could have done so much with them. And also the fact that you have Tessa Farmiga in this movie, Vera Farmiga's sister. She's a great actress. Why did you put her in such a bad movie? It's awesome to have her in this franchise. I very much enjoyed seeing her in this movie, and I actually enjoyed her in The Nun too, which I thought was a step up from this movie. Still not a great movie, but like a step up from this one, at least to me anyways. But to waste her on such a lame movie and such a obvious cash grab just was so frustrating to me. And anytime I've gone back and rewatched the Conjuring franchise, there's been multiple times I've tried to start this film, and I just end up giving up on it because it's just boring. And like, that's it. Like, that's the biggest sin, is it's boring. Now, next up on the list is Child's Play 3, and this it's the final one in my top 3 favorite horror franchises. And yes, I know things like Seed of Chucky exist in this world. I actually kind of like Seed of Chucky, so take that, haters, I guess. But the main reason this movie doesn't work for me, and I wouldn't even say that I have the level of disdain for this movie as I do for the other movies I've mentioned on this list. In fact, I feel kind of similarly to this movie that I did with Scream 6, where I don't outright hate it, but it does frustrate me, and it just is, again, like kind of a slog to get through. At this point, you are on the third movie of the Chucky franchise, and in these first 3 movies, it's Chucky going after Andy, and at this point, when you get to this point of Andy's character arc, it just feels very overdone and overused to me, and the whole thing of them being at the military academy, I think, could have worked, but it just didn't really feel like it owned being there very well, and like didn't make it an entertaining movie. It lost the heart that the first Child's Play and Child's Play 2 had, and just felt very soulless, which makes sense since this movie came out less than a year after Child's Play 2. They had hardly any time to work about it. Don Mancini has even talked openly about how he felt extremely stressed out during the making of this film. In fact, I would even say the behind the scenes of this movie, listening to the actors and how they felt about the movie, is more enjoyable than the actual movie itself. I mean, the main bully of the film, Sheldon, I really enjoyed his actor talking about how he added so much more depth himself to the character, more than what was even on the paper for said character. I think that's really cool that he got so into the role, but it still didn't make for that great of a movie. I just felt like the entire thing was just extremely boring. Even the final scene with the Chucky showdown, where they're on this like haunted house carnival ride roller coaster thing, it felt like they so bad wanted to top the Good Guy Factory from Child's Play 2, but it just kind of felt like a dud yet again. So it very much makes sense to me that the Chucky franchise laid dormant for almost a decade before Bride of Chucky ended up releasing in theaters. That movie actually brought new life and brought something new to the franchise. This one was just a rehash and a reserving of the same old that we'd already seen in the previous entries before it. Coming up next on the list, though, is Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan. And there are a lot of really bad Jason movies, and I know that there are some people who would rather have something like New Blood up here, or even Jason Goes to Hell. But for me, it is this god-awful entry. I think the entire movie is extremely misleading. The fact that it's Jason Takes Manhattan, but that's only like Jason Takes Manhattan for 20 minutes of the film, but before that he wreaks havoc on a cruise ship for the first hour. And that's the thing even too with the cruise ship setting. I think that could have really worked in this film if they would have utilized it better, but the characters are extremely unlikable. The kills for the most part aren't that much fun. The effects were extremely poor, and it just felt like another money grab for this franchise, which this franchise has plenty of them, but I can get down with a good dumb money grab if it's at least fun. This one wasn't fun though. It was just extremely boring and forgettable. And if it wasn't a Friday the 13th movie, I honestly wouldn't even remember it, quite frankly. Now, coming up next on this list, and I feel like for this franchise, when you ask someone, they're going to have different picks for what the worst is in this, because there are a lot of really god-awful movies in this franchise, but that's going to be the Hellraiser franchise, and it's going to be Hellraiser Deader. For me, that movie is extremely forgettable. I have sat through all 11 of the Hellraiser movies. For some reason, I did that anyways, especially when like most of the franchise is direct-to-video type movies. I still had some enjoyment for them. They had the very dumb 2000s feel to them, so I was able to get behind that direct-to-video vibe for some of them. Even like Hellraiser, Hellworld, I had some fun with. It was stupid, and it wasn't supposed to be a Hellraiser movie, but I still had fun with it. Versus this one, I just found it extremely boring, and I couldn't make it all the way through. And I honestly can't even tell you what it is about, because it has been so long since I tried to watch it and I tapped out. I watched every other movie in this franchise from beginning to end without a problem, but for some reason I wasn't able to finish that one, and with the garbage that's in this franchise, I feel like you guys can understand what I mean by automatically being like, this is the worst movie for me. I mean, I was able to sit through like a schlocky bad movie like Hellraiser Revelations and still have memory of it and be entertained by just how fucking bad it was. Versus this one, it just was bad, but also boring. So I couldn't do it. Like that, I'd have nothing else to say. I just couldn't do it. And then next up on this list is going to be Paranormal Activity 4, which I know things like the ghost dimension do exist. And yes, technically, the ghost dimension is a worse film. But again, the movie entertained me, and the worst thing a movie can do, I think, is bore you. If you're a bad movie, at least then you had me think about you and like push some kind of thought out of me, versus with a boring, forgettable movie, you couldn't even do that. You made me feel nothing, and by the time I've finished your movie, I'm just going to forget about you. And that's how I feel about Paranormal Activity 4. It just does very much like I was saying with Child's Play 3. It's very much just the same shtick again of the previous 3 entries, and it just doesn't really do anything for me. I mean, you have an amazing lead actress, and I enjoy her in things like Freaky. I very much liked her in Lisa Frankenstein, but here I just was not into it. And I don't think it's anything to do with her, but I just didn't like this movie. I thought the scares in it were really lackluster. I feel like every single Paranormal Activity movie, especially the first 3, even if they did the same thing, they always had like that one big, really memorable jump scare in the film, if not a couple in each film, whereas this one didn't really feel like it had that to me. And the reasoning for them recording everything in this entry just didn't feel as believable as it did in any of the other entries, and had me more questioning why it was happening. And for that reason, it ends up on the list. In fact, I don't really, again, have much to say about this one, because this movie really didn't make me feel anything one way or the other. And for it being one of my top 10 favorite horror franchises, it is one that I typically skip anytime I've rewatched these movies. And next up on the list is going to be the Forever Purge, and this is the 5th and final movie in the Purge franchise. And I don't hate this movie, but at this point, this is where I just kind of started to fall off the train a little bit, and I feel like it's a good thing that they've stopped making these movies, because when they inevitably make another one, I feel like they'll have waited enough time to actually like cook something together that's actually good. But this movie, it completely disregards the fact that the Purge was ended in the Purge election year, and doesn't give much reason for why the Purge was reinstated. A lot of the effects in it feel a lot cheaper and more like a direct-to-video movie than a actual theater release, and the characters are very egregiously only there to talk about the political message of the director. And yes, I am a liberal. I agree with the messaging, but at the end of the day, I don't like when anything is too on the nose with stuff. I don't like being spoon-fed information in your story, like I'm stupid. And I feel like that is something that this movie does, is it treats the audience like it's stupid, and it doesn't try to do anything smart with the social commentary that it's trying to do. The whole idea that the Purge shouldn't just be one night and it should be all year around makes a lot of sense for being in a world like this, because if you allow people to be violent like that, you're going to have people eventually that are just going to take advantage of it and not want that time of violence and no crime to go away, to where they can essentially live in this like outlaw vigilante justice kind of world. That all makes sense to me, and I think is a very good idea for a Purge sequel. And even here, it is entertaining at times, but it wasn't done to a good effect at the end of the day. So that's why it lands on this list. Again, it's another movie I don't necessarily hate, but it's just the worst in that franchise, and it's one of my favorite franchises, so what else can I say? But coming in at number 1, and this is the one that very much I would consider the worst horror sequel ever made, is Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead. And holy fuck, I hate this fucking movie. My opinions on it have not changed over the years. I feel like as you get older, you become a little fonder to movies, and like you can like give them passes to an extent, especially if you watch a lot of movies. You might be able to be like, okay, yeah, that isn't as bad as I remember it being. But no, I promise you, Freddy's Dead is worse than you remember it being. In fact, I have a really old video where I just completely like ranted about the film after watching the Never Sleep Again documentary, and it made me like gaslit me into thinking I would enjoy Freddy's Dead. In fact, I will just clip that rant right here, so I'll let you guys be the judge of how I felt with that and if I'm being dramatic or not, because I stand by everything that old Justice said in that video. I started the film almost immediately after finishing that documentary. I ended up renting it, wasted fucking money right there. I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to fucking tell me that. I ended up rewatching that film, and it's just baffling, the choices that they made. It's honestly probably one of the worst sequels that we've ever gotten in a franchise. Even like with bad sequels in horror franchises, usually I can find some enjoyment out of them and I'm far less critical. I usually find that I'm on the lower end of the spectrum where there's all these sequels that people absolutely hate with a passion, but I either like find them as schlocky fun, or I just think they're a genuinely good time, or they don't really offend me that much. Whereas this one, I very much fall into the majority, and it's fucking awful. Like, the whole gimmick, too, of having your last 10 minutes of the movie go into 3D! Like, I don't understand what the fucking... Like, it was such a stupid choice, and it felt so shoehorned in, and it was fitting for such a bad movie to have the 3D element to it. Like, I feel like that's when you know the franchise is running out of ideas, is when they jump to 3D. You see it in so many horror franchises. But Freddy's at his most comedic and quippiest, and it's to a detriment to the story. It's just not a good fucking movie. Old Justice may have been awkward and had very bad lighting and audio, but I still agree with every single word that came out of his fucking mouth. Freddy's Dead is a god-awful fucking movie, and I will never force myself to sit through that monstrosity ever again. But anyways, that's gonna wrap up this video. You guys should let me know if you agree with some of my takes on these worst sequels in my favorite franchises, or tell me some of your least favorite sequels in your favorite horror franchises. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. And if you want future videos just like this and you aren't subscribed to the channel yet, then I would love if you click that subscribe button. I cover everything and anything horror on this channel. But with that all out of the way, this has been Justice, and I really hope to see you guys on the next one. Take care.